Good morning, climate resilience enthusiasts. Welcome to the second day of the CLIMAAX Webstival, from Insights to Action, Advancing Climate Resilience. For those who have not been able to attend yesterday's session, my name is Jip Lense. I'm a project officer at the European Association of Development Agencies, and together with my colleagues Christina and Jose, I will be hosting this session today. Before we start, I'd like to walk you through today's housekeeping. First of all, it's important to know that this session will be recorded. So if you do not wish to appear on camera, please switch your cameras off. We have reserved plenty of time for questions and answers, but we also have the option to raise your hand in case you have a question in a dedicated Q&A moment. But you're also more than welcome to drop a comment or a question in the chat function of this Zoom call. So we have a packed and very interesting schedule for today. This session will be opened by Priska Hamers, who is a policy officer for the mission Adaptation on Climate Change, who will highlight the mission in further detail. We'll also delve further into the CLIMAAX toolbox for regional climate risk assessments today. And finally, we'll have a community of practice session on tailoring climate risk assessment tools and services, turning strategic choices into smart investments. As you see, we have quite a packed schedule for today. So I would like to start right away and hand it over to Priska Hamers, as I mentioned, policy officer at the Mission Adaptation on Climate Change, for her intervention. So please, Priska, feel free to take the floor. I think
yes, you will do the slides. So
yeah.
I'm here. Yeah. Please, the next slide, of the first slide. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and we are very pleased with the climate project as part of the big program of the EU mission on climate adaptation. Next slide, please. The mission on climate adaptation is part of a bigger European policy framework. And well, as everybody knows, climate change is quite a threat to the world, but also Europe. So with the Green Deal, we made a law that by 2050 we should be resilient. In 2021, the next law came, that was the climate law, and that was adopted then. And part of the climate law is not just mitigation, but also adaptation. And so in 2021, we also adopted the adaptation strategy. That is all, those are all new laws, but we are planning now, because climate change is going faster than expected in the last decade. So we are preparing a new climate adaptation plan at the moment. Because this is a European legislation, next slide, please. A part of the adaptation strategy was to advance Europe in becoming adapted. So we have a number of objectives: to be smarter in adaptation, to be more systemic and faster. To be smarter, we have a number of research initiatives, and to be faster and more systemic, we also have the mission to have more regions really adopting climate adaptation. The next slide, please. So the objectives of the climate adaptation in 2022 were to have at least 150 European regions and communities become resilient by 2030. That's part of the policy to become faster and smarter. And it seemed very ambitious at that time, but next slide, please. When we communicated that to the regions, we had not 150 regions, but we had 311 regions who really wanted to be climate adaptive and resilient by 2030. Here you see the map of the regions who wants to work with the Commission, and on the left side you will see the projects on research and innovation, the programs on research and innovation that helps these regions to become smarter. And one of the projects, as I said, is the CLIMAAX projects where you are participating in. But don't forget there is also LIFE and Interact funding for regions who want to work on climate adaptation. Next slide, please. With the mission, we developed a so-called RAST, Regional Adaptation Support Tool, that will help regions to become more adaptive with looking at 6 steps in their programs. And one of the steps is, of course, to know what the risks are in your region. So on that step, CLIMAAX is one of the programs we have to make regions more adaptive, but to help them with the first step. The third step is identify the options, then selecting adaptation options, and then implementing these options. Of course, you also want to know if your adaptation worked, so we have a monitoring and learning step. We want to do it for the Europe as a whole, just to help the regions and to have a more harmonized framework and also toolbox that can be used by all regions. And as you know, CLIMAAX is supporting the regions with funding and knowledge. Next step. CLIMAAX itself is working with a community of but you are also part as the big mission of adaptation community. So we have a mission adaptation community where not only the CLIMAAX regions are in, but also the regions who are participating in the other Horizon programs and the 311 regions who wanted to participate at this adaptation. We organize for this community training events, sharing of stories, and there is a portal and there is a virtual base to exchange knowledge. We really want regions to put their stories and their lessons learned in this portal, so they will gain international visibility, but also help other regions with the things they learned. Next slide, please. So there are different communication options. We have communications on social media, we have a newsletter, and we have a website. So please look at these in addition to what CLIMAAX is already doing for you, but we are working also on the other steps of the RAST. So if you finished your first step with CLIMAAX, please continue onto your pathway to resilience. Another thing I would like to say is that we are following all the projects very closely at the Commission, and we look at the lessons learned from all these projects while developing the next legislation. So it's very important to show us what you are doing so that we can use it in our next climate adaptation plan that will be launched in 2026. That's it for me, but if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you very much, Priska, for the overview and for the reassuring words about the future steps that we can undertake. In case there's any questions in the chat, perhaps we can answer them in writing. I don't see any other questions right now for the moment. So in case, feel free to write your questions in the chat and then we take it from there. So Priska, thank you very much again for that great overview of the mission on adaptation to climate change. And of course, it's very important that we remain committed to ensuring that we reach its aims. So thank you very much again for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, now let's dive further into the CLIMAAX toolbox for regional climate risk assessments. We have with us today Christopher Polster, who is research software engineer from the development section in forecasts and services department at the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts. First, he'll introduce you to the CLIMAAX handbook. So the tools that we have to develop the climate risk assessments. But after that, we would like to hear from you, but more on that a little bit later on. So first, I'd like to give the floor to you, Christopher.
Thank you, Jip. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Jip. And I will be continuing introductions today by moving on to the CLIMAAX handbook, which is sort of our web-based representation of the tools that CLIMAAX offers you. And yeah, so let's get right into it with the first slide. What is the CLIMAAX handbook? If you've not seen it already, it's a website that you can access, that anyone can access. You can find it at handbook.climaax.eu, or if you scan this QR code right now. And as I said, it is essentially a representation of all the tools in the toolbox that CLIMAAX offers you. This includes the framework, so you can find step-by-step description and guidance of going through the framework in the handbook. It contains risk workflows for seven different hazards that we are currently considering, where you can actually kind of get into the numbers, do a quantitative risk analysis to support your journey through the framework, but these are also standalone and can be used independent of the framework. And there are supporting resources there that essentially are there to sort of help in carrying out a risk assessment, information on data sets, technical documentation for prerequisites of using the workflows. And as you can see here on the right in the screenshot, there's quite a wealth of different kinds of information there. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that, for example, for the framework pages, of course, there's the description in text form. There's tip boxes with supporting informations for each of the steps of the framework. You will find short summary videos that quickly summarize the important parts of that specific step in the framework for you. And as you're going through the steps, there's guiding questions always attached on the right side that you can sort of take as, well, the guiding questions that you can find answers to as you're carrying out your risk assessment. Now, the next part on the next slide is our workflows. So these workflows are there to support step number 3 of the framework, which is the risk analysis. And as I said, this is where you get quantitative and really start to look at, for example, climate model outputs and combine that with information on vulnerability and exposure to define a quantitative risk. Each of the workflows has sort of the same structure. That you will always find an introduction page that just takes you through the general methodology, provides some information on the data sets, sort of what the concept for risk is that this workflow adopts. And then as you go into the numbers, there's a hazard assessment step first, where it's generally looking at climate data, doing some first processing on that in order to calculate a hazard index, followed by the risk assessment step, which then combines that together with the vulnerability and exposure data into a full-fledged risk assessment. The principle that we follow behind all of this on the next slide is the principle of standardized flexibility, as we're calling it. So the idea is that the workflows have sort of this similar structure. They follow sort of common principles, but they are made in a way that they are flexible enough that you can customize them as much as you like. You can include as much information that you already have or that you would like to use. And the way that we are able to do this is by implementing them with interactive notebooks. And these are the Jupyter notebooks. And first of all, they're really nice because they combine text, code, and output. So as you can see here on the right, there's some code at the top that produces the plot, and you get some text around it to sort of explain everything that happens. And this is all in one package, so you don't have to go back and forth between different applications all the time. However, in order to get the necessary flexibility, we do need to have the power of a proper programming language. For example, in our case, we are using Python. But we're using only Python, and that sort of takes care of all the steps from the data downloading to the data processing and the visualization, all within the notebooks. So you do need a certain technical expertise in order to use these, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible by sort of sticking to the Python ecosystem, which is fairly widespread. We're sticking to standard data formats. Every workflow comes with a pre-configured example, so that you can start from, that you can have a look at if you want to include your own data, which we highly encourage. If you have certain local knowledge that you can bring to the workflow in that way, you can sort of look at how the example works in order to include your own. And everything is open source, just as the handbook is. We're developing all of this openly on GitHub, where you can also get in contact with us if you like. Going to the next slide. In addition to the framework and the workflows, there's additional resources. As I mentioned, these are, for example, technical documentation, how to run the workflows, things you need to know about Python, about the software packages we're using, how to set up an environment, things like that. But we also have examples from our pilot project, so experience from our pilot project that we're starting to channel into the handbook, and there's more to come there. But for now, we, for example, have example answers to the guiding questions, or at least part of the guiding questions from the framework already in the handbook, where if you're unsure sort of what your possible outcome would be, or maybe you need some clarification on a question, you can have a look there and maybe get some more information. We're keeping a glossary and frequently answered or asked questions based on essentially the feedback that we get from our users. There's information on how to access support that the CLIMAAX project provides for at least the next 2 years. And we have links to plenty of external resources, for example, on exploration tools for climate data, additional sites that can help you take steps for the framework. One of the things that I'd like to highlight on the next slide is the resources on data sets in the handbook. So in part, we have our own data sets that we in CLIMAAX provide. These are mostly there to support the examples that we provide in the notebooks. Sometimes there are also data sets with data that was specifically prepared in order to make a workflow possible. We have a couple of mirrors for data sets that are hard to access as well, just to make it easier to use the workflows.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for these great insights. You mentioned that feedback and jointly shaping the toolbox and framework is very important. So we would like to open up the conversation and hear from the audience as well, both participating regions and those interested are welcome to answer some questions that we have in a survey for you. So I will launch it now for you, and then we can take a look at some of the results we have. If all is correct, you should have a question in your screen right now. The first one would be, is the CLIMAAX climate risk assessment framework fit for purpose in your region? So the options are yes, fully, somewhat, not really, and not at all. Feel free to take your time to answer the questions. The second one would be, do the outcomes of the provided risk assessment workflows address the issues that arise from your application of the CLIMAAX framework? And then the third question would be, are outcomes of the risk assessment framework actionable within your regional settings? So I'll give it a few more moments for you to answer the questions. All right. We're at about 30%, so feel free to answer the questions if you haven't already. And as we mentioned before, these results will be very useful for us to see the feedback that you have on the tools that were created, of course. So this is a very important lesson for us. All right, we'll give it about 30 more seconds. Okay, so regarding the first question, we see that 57% of the people said that yes, the climate risk assessment framework is fit for purpose in our region, or somewhat. So I would say that is very positive. Regarding the second question, do the outcomes of the provided risk assessment workflows address the issues that arise from your application of the CLIMAAX framework? People answered, 59% answered yes, fully, and 41% says somewhat. And then regarding the outcomes of the risk assessment framework and whether they are actionable within your regional settings, most people said partially actionable, and then the second biggest result would be yes, completely actionable. So I'm going to close the poll, and you'll be able to see the results again after the session. We'll create an overview for you to see the results. All right, we also have some open questions for you. For that, I would like to direct you to the Slido that we have created. So if you scan the QR code, you'll be able to write your answers to the question, what do you see as the biggest challenge for you or your region in carrying out the climate risk assessment following the CLIMAAX framework? You can also go to slido.com and enter the numbers 4988488. I see that one participant is typing. You don't have to be shy. You can also be anonymous. So feel free to write your answers. Okay, so we have someone saying a lack of budget and data monitoring. Lack of data is something that we see more often. Okay, we see the results coming in. Easy, understandable interpretation of the outcomes from CLIMAAX Toolbox workflows. spatial resolution, data availability for smaller regions, data quality, I see a comment and also a kind of a question, so perhaps we can we can address that. Risk is multidimensional with lots of social and economic issues that I don't see, as far as I know, in here. Anything on that front? We have a lot of experts from the CLIMAAX consortium with us today. Of course, Christopher, but also from Deltaris, from YASA. So if anyone would like to pick up that question, feel free to do so.
I can try to pick up the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yes, risk is multidimensional, dimensional, and there are social economic issues, but also environmental, physical, and there are many other factors that come together. So this is where the fourth step of the framework comes in, where you evaluate the outputs of the CLIMAAX toolbox, and this is where you contextualize it with input from different experts, stakeholders that you decide are important, and then altogether you evaluate the risk in a social context and also in context where quantitative data might be missing. So there are many perspectives that are coming together, and yeah, this is then where the framework helps with the quantitative output of the workflows. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that great answer. So if we take a look at the other comments that we see that very often data is mentioned. For example, first we had an issue about accessing to Hub. Then it's solved by you. Some errors we had in SEP workflows, some technical problems, but everything is solved. Finally, we can say some challenges about big data naturally. So it seems that there have been some hurdles along the way, but that it is going better at this point. So that is great. All right, I think these are all very useful inputs. We also have a second question for you, and of course, we'll take all of your comments into consideration at a later stage, as we will, yeah, we will look at the comments later on as well, and we'll save them, of course. So if you agree, I will go to the second question at this point. The second question was, what additional content or support would enhance the toolbox's relevance and utility for you or your region? I see that 7 participants are typing. Hill risk assessments, relation between impacts and costs, putting money on stake will engage action, contacting other pilot regions to discuss how they apply the workflows, sensitization, collaboration, and knowledge sharing, risk assessment based on public data available for all the EU, and I'd also like to point out that this is also your opportunity to ask any question that you may have to the experts that we have in the Zoom call with us today. As I mentioned, we have experts from across the board today, from IASA, Deltares, etc. So feel free to ask your questions in the Zoom chat as well. One suggestion is about the spatial clipping the big data for a region before running the tool. This is very important for efficiency. All right, future scenarios, risk assessment for all 7 risks. More information on how to apply the toolbox training sessions about workflows. All right. Spreading message to citizens. That's indeed something that we've seen yesterday in the call as well. That's stakeholder engagement and community engagement is a very important issue in this process. Harmonized climate inputs for all workflows. All right. Thank you all for your great inputs. I think this is something that we can really look into at a later stage as well. So at this point, I would like to ask if you have any specific questions, please raise your hands and feel free to take the stage. Or if you would prefer to type it in the chat, that is also more than welcome, of course. So feel free to take a moment to ask your questions here, as we think it's a great opportunity to do so. We've already seen some questions before that were already addressed in the chat. But yeah, feel free to add more questions as you deem fit. All right. I think for the moment, there are not many questions. I've seen one question coming in here. Would we need your approval to use tools outside of the specified CLIMAAX handbook after presenting our arguments for their sustainability? Is there anyone from...
Sorry,
Yes.
I just sorry to corrupt your speech. This question, especially the one of the response of my questions, so maybe I just want to inform it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is part of a conversation.
Yeah.
The answer, and thanks for reaching out to us about this, by the way. I just hadn't had the chance to answer your email this morning yet. No, you don't need our approval for that. If we trust that as you are the experts for your regions, you know the tools that will benefit you the most. But of course we are happy to have a look with you at this, and yeah, maybe we have some ideas of how this could be sort of working together with things that we already have as well. So yeah, as Frederick mentioned, feel free to inform us at least about it. When it comes specifically to sort of the deliverables aspect of CLIMAAX and the way you're going through, consider though that you have essentially phase 2 specifically dedicated to adapting the workflows to your local context. So you might want to consider, given the shorter length of the first phase, to sort of carry out this kind of work, maybe preferentially in the second phase of your project rather than the first. But yeah, you're very, very welcome to apply tools not necessarily from our workflows in your analysis.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. Especially, I am just the bridge of our technical equipe and me as a coordination way. If I understand very well, their arguments also, as you, I also personally need to arguments of why they want to use another tools. They told me it means the more updated ones. But of course, I will explain you after their response more details and more technical in email. Thank you so much for this chance.
All right.
Thank you very much for that question and for taking this stage. I think it's a great opportunity to do so. Is there anyone else in the audience that has any other comments that they would like to add or any questions? All right. I think for now there are no further comments. So in any case, it's of course possible to send a message to the technical team as well in case of any other concerns or doubts or any other comments. So I would like to thank everyone, Christopher, especially for your presentation, for the availability to answer the questions that came from the chat and also from the stream. And thank you to all of you for adding your inputs to the Slido and to the quiz, and we'll make sure that these answers are going to be looked at. So thank you once again, Christopher, for this great intervention. And then I would like to hand things over to our colleagues in charge of the community of practice, who will delve further into turning strategic choices into smart investments in the field of climate risk assessment tools and services. And for that, I would like to welcome Dr. Jaroslav Nisiak, Director of the Research Division, Risk Assessment and Adaptation Strategies at the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, also known as CMCC. So Jaroslav, the floor is yours. And I believe you'll be sharing screen, so I'll stop sharing at this point.
Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be with you. So I will just need the permission to share my screen, right? It's not yet there.
Yes,
okay. Right.
You should have it at this point. Yeah.
Right. And I believe you should see now my screen, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. So good morning again. My name is Jaromír Nisiak, and I will be moderating this session dedicated to community of practice. Community of practice is one of the initiatives that CLIMAAX launched, and it is basically bringing together people with shared interest in order to elaborate solution to the challenges that you have encountered. So you might know, if you are new to the community of practice, these meetings are held every month, and we are discussing different ways of supporting you, not just, providing the toolbox and providing the guidance, but also helping you to go through and helping you to address your challenges. And today we will be talking about the critical issue, how to design the investment strategies for strategic climate risk related data, tools, technologies, and capabilities, right? So some of your regions have received cascading grants, and this is great. Some others are applying, and there will be in the future more grant flowing to the region and subnational governments in order to improve the understanding of the risk and inform the regional climate risk assessment. But how to go about those grants? What is the best way of allocating the resources, and how to efficiently cultivate an ecosystem of climate risk knowledge and specialized climate risk services? On the other hand, those of you who already have the fund, you will need to find somebody to work with. So how to best match the demand and supply for the specialized climate risk and adaptation services. And we will be talking about this issue, and we will hear also insight from another colleagues that are highly knowledgeable about providing specialized assistance to the subnational and national authorities. So our panel today is composed by Nieves Peña from Tecnalia, who is a senior researcher on climate change and energy and environment division. And the second panelist is Hasse Gozen, who is the director of the climate adaptation services in the Netherlands. And just before giving them the floor, let me introduce a little bit what we will be talking about. So the CLIMAAX toolbox and the handbook has adopted a certain strategy to empower cities and regions. You have access to how to do reference guidebook, but you have also access to the open access and reproducible executable tools. Those tools are able to codify the risk assessment and ensure that the risk assessment is performed in a structured and standardized way. So even if you need to repeat the same exercise after a few years, you have how to do that, and also the executable code that is codifying the different steps. There are a number of other toolboxes and approaches how to support subnational authorities in improving the risk assessment. And one of those we will be talking about is Reach Out. Reach Out is also a European funded project that has embarked in a journey with specific regions and cities, especially cities, in using a different approach. It created a collaborative journey. So there was a side-by-side working together co-development of climate services for specific use in different cities. So the knowledge has been co-produced together, and the team has assisted the regions in application of the tool. So this is what we will be hearing about from our panelists. A few housekeeping rules. Please keep your microphone muted. Use the chat for any type of question. Raise your hand. Stay engaged. And please note that we are recording this session. So again, these are our panelists. And perhaps let me first turn to Haze. Haze, you have been on the forefront of working with the municipalities for many years in the Netherlands and elsewhere. How do you think, how do you use the analytical insight to stimulate the action and the long-term planning that is needed for transformation adaptation? I stop sharing if you have some slide, and I give you the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Jaro. Let me try and share my screen. Is it visible now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, it says disabled screen sharing. Do I need to get
Yeah, I think
permission?
Yip is going to help us. So, yeah, you are now
Yeah,
co-host.
you have permission now.
Right, yeah.
Okay, okay, sorry. Now I can't seem to open Zoom. Maybe, sorry guys.
No problem.
Share screen, yeah, okay, now I'm almost there. Yes, now it should work.
It's here, not in the full presentation mode though. Yes, now it's perfect.
Now it is?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, thanks so much also for inviting me to share some of my personal experience in working with cities. You already mentioned the Reach Out project. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but first I'll take you back to, say, around 10 years ago when, together with the ministry in the Netherlands, we initiated the spatial adaptation program in the Netherlands. And basically this kicked off a 6-year cycle of risk assessments, ambition setting and visioning, and action planning. And this was a sort of mandatory activity for all municipalities to join into. Basically every municipality some 10 years ago started with their risk assessments, and we call that the analysis phase. So it's about mapping vulnerabilities, but also looking for opportunities. The idea was after completion of this risk assessment, cities would start on identifying ambitions, objectives, challenges, and turning that into concrete strategies. So that's the ambition phase. And that should then result into actions, and actions need to be assured. So there's policy assurance, there's implementation. So that was the idea. Analysis, ambition, action. I'll get to that later. So every municipality started city stress testing activity. So mapping climate risks, hazards, and vulnerabilities, resulting in maps like these. And many design ateliers, we call them, so sessions where adaptation options were designed, were organized throughout the country. By last year, I would say 99% of all the municipalities have completed their risk assessments and have, in one way or the other, developed plans, strategies for adaptation. So this was quite a successful policy that was implemented, and it really boosted the market for climate services. So this really led to a rapid growth of consultancies, also self-employed advisors that work for smaller municipalities. Really, this market developed quite rapidly. So making mandatory risk assessments or making risk assessments a mandatory thing is really helpful if you want to develop the market for climate services. Our role in this whole thing was to develop a central web portal for the Netherlands, giving access to free and open data on climate projections, climate impacts, so different flood types, heat maps, what have you, all available through the Climate Impact Atlas, and you can find the URL here. And also in our website numbers, we saw a boost of users. So when we started the activity 10, 15 years ago, we had about maybe 100 visitors per month. And now we are over 500 visitors per day, which is really a lot for a small country like the Netherlands. We also developed a web portal, a knowledge portal, and this keeps track of all the work that cities are doing. So all risk assessments, or most of them, are publicly available and disclosed. And also adaptation strategies, options, measures that have been implemented are available on the web portal. We try to make them accessible, also to inspire other cities to give good examples. And here also the numbers have gone up steeply. So with the two websites together, we have almost 2,000 unique visitors per day. So this is really been quite a successful climate service development, helped by this mandatory policy. Now, those three phases, so analysis, ambition, and action, were the inspiration for the Reach Out project, which we started 3.5 years ago. The idea was here to take the lessons from the Netherlands and see if they could be scaled up to other cities across Europe. So we selected 7 cities and city hubs across Europe, and we pilot tested this approach, and we set up a toolkit with a collection of tools that would help those cities complete the phases of analysis, ambition, and action. So it's a really simple type of framework. Its setup is modular and flexible. So you also in the figure here, you don't see a direction. It's up to the cities to decide where they start. And we saw some of the cities diving into action immediately because they already had some idea of climate risks and vulnerabilities, and they were looking for underpinning of actions and options they had already thought of. So there's no fixed order. It is just a way to structure different adaptation activities. So this is the AAA framework. Another important thing in Reach Out that we try to establish is to turn adaptation into a positive story. And this is something I've learned from working with cities across the country. The city administration wants to tell a positive story. Of course, the urgency and the risks are important, and we want to know that. We want to have good knowledge on this, but risk information alone will not bring change. You need to make the connection to positive change. You want to create a positive story around this. We want to build better cities, more healthy cities, more resilient cities. So this is really an important framing of the issue. And one way to do that was working on what we call climate stories. And for each of the city hubs in the project, we developed a climate story. And in the story, we try to connect to, say, the local, the context of the city. So here in the example of Milan, we have two characters in the story, so a grandfather and his daughter, a granddaughter, and they walk through the city and they talk about how they experience heat, and they talk about trees and how they grow and so forth. So there's data in here, but the data is sort of packaged into a localized story that people of the city of Milan can really relate to. And for us, this was something new to be working on, and we are really excited about this type of work. And yeah, also what this shows is that it's not that climate services is not only about the generation of high quality climate data. No, it's also about communication and how to visualize the story, how to bring your story across. I think this was a key lesson from the Reach Out project. For the sake of time, I'll keep it short. I just want to point you to this story that was published this week on the Climate Adapt and mission on the EU mission platform. This takes you through one of our cities and the journey they experienced throughout the project, how they worked on the AAA toolkit, making combinations of different types of tools. The city worked together with Tecnalia, and Nieves will be in the next presentation. They developed a thermal assessment tool, which allowed the city to identify heat hotspots across the city. Then our Irish partner from Cork developed social vulnerability maps. And if you combine the two, you have heat hotspots combined with social vulnerability, neighborhoods with low social vulnerability. And this gives you sort of prioritized neighborhoods within the city to target your actions on first. A similar thing was done for pluvial flooding. Yaro, CMCC did a lot of interesting work on mapping pluvial floods at high resolution. And here again, by combining that with social vulnerability, this gives you a nice way to prioritize actions across the city. Well, if you're interested, please visit our website, either the Reach Out website, or have a look at this story on the Climate Adapt portal. Well, to wrap up, some of the experiences from working with cities. Well, we've learned that cities want to make different combinations of tools. Mapping floods, heat, hotspots, combining that with social vulnerability, but then also turning this into attractive visualizations and telling the story, communicating the story to a wider audience, also to the communities, to policymakers. So there are different ways to work on the outreach of this information. This is really crucial. So mapping and identifying prioritized locations for urban greening is of great interest to cities. Working on the stories and visualizations is key. already came to that. And then setting things up in a modular way. So we worked with 7 completely different cities, and each of those cities developed their own roadmap through this toolkit of services. Everyone went a different path, and therefore I believe there is no fixed order or stepwise procedures that everyone will follow in the same way. No, we have to allow for flexibility and allow for cities to find their own way through the landscape of climate services. And this is also because adaptation is a broad topic, and there are different policy documents where parts of the adaptation challenge will have to be anchored into. And maybe there's a heat plan of the city, maybe there is a water strategy, maybe there's an urban drainage plan. And those 3 different policy documents will have 3 different deadlines, will have 3 different departments working on it. So there is no one way. It's about mainstreaming this into different policies, which all have their own dynamics and different departments working. And I think then that's my last point. Cities do not always know what they need, and needs may change over time. And I think that's also something that we've learned. In many projects, you see there's a need assessment at the start. Then we start developing things and we deliver that to the system, to the city. I think that doesn't work because the real world out there is chaotic. And as I said, there are many policies that have their own dynamics, and these needs change. So we really try to work in an agile way, where we updated the roadmaps every year. So working with the city on a more continuous basis, readjusting your plan of action is also very crucial. I think for the sake of time, I will leave it there and give it over back to you, Jaro.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hasse. That was really insightful. Congratulations for the achievement in the Netherlands. 98% of the municipalities already implementing the adaptation plan and building upon detailed climate risk insight and knowledge. This is great achievement. Thank you very much. I like very much your outline. So it's interesting that this analysis, ambition, and action, they do not have a pre-order. The analysis can be used in order to specify the ambition. The ambition might be used in order to specify what analytical tools and target you need. So thank you very much for that. We will take it further. But it also requires a lot of tools. And with that, I would like to turn to Nives. So Hasse, if you could stop sharing your slide and give the opportunity for Nives to share her slides. And Nives, we have heard about a number of tools, both from the CLIMAAX, but also Hasse anticipated other tools. Of course, in order to meet the demand for climate risk information at the subnational level, we need any kind of tool, and many more than those that are included in the CLIMAAX toolbox. Can you briefly introduce us to the climate assessment tools and services that were developed under your leadership in the Reach Out project? Over to you.
Thank you, Jaro, and thank you to all of you to give us the opportunity to share with you our Reach Out outcomes and insights. I have a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen now.
Please do.
I think...
We see it? Yes, now it's perfect.
Okay. Okay, so as Jaro was asking and Hasse was explaining, we have been working in Reach Out with this AAA framework based on these 3 components and analysis and vision and action. But it was also very important for us to organize the information around these three components. And this is why we created this AAA toolkit in Reach Out, which is organizing different resources, tool, services, guidance around these three components in order to support not only climate risk assessment, but also action and really enhance resilience in different European cities. So the full idea of this AAA toolkit was to offer a flexible and modular way to select and work with these different resources. An additional element is that it's tailored to local use and is as cities that have been working with us in Reach Out. So at the same time, better design the different guidance and resources that are available now in this final set of the AAA toolkit, but we also wanted to offer not only the tool as such, but also the tools in action. Because one of the learnings in Reach Out is that we have different ways of learning, and an important way of learning is what we share with our peers. So showing what the cities are implementing the tools in their local context was really important to raise awareness in other cities, and also became fans of these tools. And this is why we have organized the first one is are all the tools and services that have been co-designed these cities and now are available not for these cities but for other European cities. The second block is tools in action, as I was saying, how these tools have been used in Reach Out cities. We also have a kind of facts where there are typical questions asked and how the Reach Out resources can solve these typical questions. And we have also connected the AAA framework with the European framework, as Priska Homers, I forgot the name. Priska was explaining at the beginning of today. There are the urban adaptation support tool framework, which really is supporting cities towards adaptation. And what we have done also is try to embed these tools into this framework so that cities can also follow those frameworks with our tools. But as Hasse was saying, in our framework, there is not a fixed there are not fixed steps. These components can be adapted and follow in different orders. So these are
Sorry to interrupt.
The key components. Yes.
But I think there is an issue with the Wi-Fi. So if you agree, maybe to close the camera, sometimes it's
Okay.
a bit better, so that we at least have the sound. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Feel free to go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that now the connection is better. I also wanted to share with you this because here in the center of the slide you can see one of the key values of reach out which fit in its driven. Because we have been working in a collaborative way with the cities, but not only with the municipality, but other stakeholders of the city, so that we have been co-creating which are the needs from them, but also identifying some other needs that they were not so clear. They were tacit needs that have been explicitly identified and addressed during this project. Cities have different challenges, different requirements, different contexts, and this is why we have been working with them in these different key themes: floods, extreme heat, also a financial area, and also on the pathways and adaptation strategies areas. And we have been organizing the different tools that are available in Reach Out in these different topics, trying to harmonize and integrate the knowledge that is available at the European level, but also gathering information at the local context and taking into account what has been done before in cities, so that it can be integrated and offer something that is usable and integrated in the city. Another important point is this mutual learning and social awareness that we have been also working in Reach Out, because as we were also speaking in the previous session, we know that the risk is there, but how to raise awareness not only at the municipality areas, but also on the society, on the different sectors, and at the different levels of the city and on the regions. And this has been done through these stories connected to people, and this is why we have tried to create different stories based on what has been done with technical knowledge and with cities, and this has been spread in each city through these different climate stories. Based on this, I just wanted to summarize some AAA solutions that we have delivered. One of it is specifically this Reach Out tool and services that they can be find and used to support different stages of this adaptation cycle, and that have been tailored to different levels of maturity. So there are light approaches, there are of course some customized approaches that need to be work with different cities, and there are of course other more complex customization that can be done. There are also these thematic demonstrators, and as we have already shared with you, there are some mission stories like the one shared by in the chat with Logroño, but there are other themators that will be also available in the final version of the tool in the coming months. So in future, you will be able to find all this information there. So the main finding or insights that we wanted to share with you is that for us it was important to incorporate features in the AAA toolkit that connect elementary service, so that these connections can allow to better integrate and use these tools. So somehow this AAA toolkit is not only a set of resources, but it tried also to matches the demand for and supply of specialized climate services, to really foster cross-sectorial collaboration and building what we are building today here, a community of practice. Because at the end, what is important is really understand from others and be able to reuse and use things based on what has been done in other projects, in other cities, and in other regions. So finally, another important insight is the climate stories, but not as an outcome, but the climate stories for us in Reach Out has been a very key instrument for raising awareness and also for mutual understanding. And when I say mutual understanding, I refer to the mutual understanding between different areas of the municipality and also mutual understanding between technical people that is developing a climate service and policy people, that we all have different, let's say, languages, and climate stories allows us to understand together and build a common language to build this resilient in cities. And finally, the last insight that I wanted to share with you is that adaptation into urban development and mitigation action. So for us, sometimes we isolated different concepts, and it's important to have an holistic view on adaptation, trying to embed it in different urban challenges, because this is the only way we can connect with each other and really build resilience in cities. So this is my last comment for you.
Thank you so much, Nieves. That was really very nice. So it basically showcased the packaging of different type of assessment into a more comprehensive input for the policy planning and decision making. This is very nice. So Reach Out has been really successful. Reach Out is ending his journey and hands over, let's say, the tools and the experience to the community like this one, community of practice of CLIMAAX. I would like to stress once again that the CLIMAAX is open to any kind of tools that come from the open source and open access community. And it's definitely a sort of repository that will grow and grow, taking on board more tools developed in other areas in order to contribute to what the subnational governments need. Before we continue with our session, I just wanted to ask whether there is any question from the audience to our panelists. We can take 2 or 3 questions or comments from the audience. If you would like to raise your hand and or unmute your microphone and take the floor. If not, then let me introduce you to the next part of this session. What we would like to do and what we have prepared for you today. So we will now turn break out into 2 different breakout rooms, and this is based on your understanding, whether you understand yourself as the user of climate risk information and services, or you are on the side of those that develop the climate risk knowledge inside and provide the climate services. So we will split into the 2 breakout rooms, and each breakout room will have a different objective. So the breakout room that I will be moderating is bringing together the users of climate risk information and services. So this is basically those of you that come from public agencies, authorities, regional administration, and we'll be further discussing how the community of practice can help you how to design a convincing and useful and efficient program for you for building capacity and learning from one another. And we will be doing that based on a survey that we have prepared and that we have previously discussed in December during our last community of practice solution. The second breakout room that will be moderated by Hase and Nives will bring together those that classify themselves as more on the analytical side. And the scope of that discussion will be to explore effective ways of matching demand and supply. So that means how to help the regions and cities to find the most appropriate and suitable knowledge producer or knowledge service provider. So we will have these two discussions. I think the breakout rooms are now open, so you might click on the breakout room which you would like to go to. Yeah. So you see, if you open the breakout rooms, a button at the bottom of your Zoom, you will see there are two breakout rooms, users and developers. And please choose the one that you would like to continue following. I see many of you are doing that. There are still many unassigned people. We are here to help you to go to the room that is most appropriate. Okay, still 70 people undecided. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you see breakout rooms where you can go to. You click on the breakout room you would like to go to. 60 people unassigned. Okay, it's going down. So for the next half an hour, we will be in the two different breakout rooms. You can choose to follow the discussion. Welcome in the plenary room. Thank you very much for staying with us and joining again the plenary. Thank you for the moderator and for everybody for contributing with insightful comments and questions. This is all we had time for during this community of practice session. But before we hand over to Yeb, I would like to invite a colleague of mine, Fulvia, who is managing the community of practice, to anticipate the next steps and the next appointment of the COP. Over to you, Fulvia.
Thank you very much, Yaro. I'm going to share my screen just to project the information because we can anticipate what we are working on right now. So we can anticipate that the next event for the community of practice will be on the 27th of February, the same time as usual, so 10:30 to noon. And since we are trying to follow up with your requests, but also the preferences and the interest you expressed during these kind of events, we are focusing on a topic that is very sensitive for all of you, which is citizen and stakeholder engagement in climate risk assessment and adaptation planning. So we'll try to shape the agenda as soon as possible and provide relevant information, but for now we can anticipate this. So please book your calendars for this event and stay tuned for following updates. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just to remind you that the community of practice is holding a meeting every month or roughly every month, and it's dedicated to the topic that you are interested in and you are able to co-shape the agenda. So if you would like us to focus on some additional activities, just drop us an email. You have email contact. Just let us know what you would like to do us next. And with that, I'm happy to close the session and the community of practice. Thank you very much, Ella, for the panelists, for the moderators, Ella, for everybody contributing to this, and hand over to Yip. Yip, thank you very much. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Yaro, for the great session. I feel like we learned a lot today, so and it was very interactive. So thank you very much again for that very insightful session. And with that, we reach the end of today's session. I would like to thank each and every one of the audience members for taking the time to be with us today, in participating, in asking questions, in participating in our polls, etc., in the community of practice session. So thank you very much for that. And I would also like to give a huge thanks to the CLIMAAX Consortium who were here today also in big numbers to answer any of the questions and participate in the discussions, and also our esteemed speakers. So thank you all very much for attending. It has been 2 very engaging and interesting days. Of course, you'll be able to watch the recording of the session, and you'll be able to read the slides back as well. So please keep an eye open to our website for that. With that, I'll leave you here the contact details of the consortium, wherever you can reach us for more information in the future. So thank you all very much again for attending today, and I'm looking forward to the next event. Thank you very much.